Hello there, I'm Callum and welcome to the EU in Review, where I review the Star Wars Expanded Universe as I experience it. And this time is the exact follow-on from Tales of the Jedi Golden Age of the Sith, with Tales of the Jedi, The Fall of the Sith Empire. This was released in 1997, it was written by Kevin J. Anderson and penciled by Dario Carrasco Jr. So, what did I think overall? Well, I think overall I really enjoyed this, and this looked into what's happening with sort of the fall of the Sith Empire, even though it's sort of like, the titles for these Tales of the Jedi ones, at least at this point, seem weird, because they're like, well, this isn't exactly showing the end of the Sith Empire when you think of the fall of the Sith Empire. Sure, they fell a bit, but they're gonna be back, as obviously we have SWTOR and other things, at least in the perspective of now. And the Sith are still alive. Like, Naga Sadow retreated at the end. Spoiler alert, sorry. But Naga Sadow at the end is still alive. Stuff's happened. I mean, if you haven't read this by now, it's almost as old as I am, so you can't avoid some spoilers. Anyway, the overall plot, I think the ideas were good in it. The genre and tone was really nice and unique for its area. It really just continued on the great stuff from Golden Age of the Sith, to be honest, with a lot of that. And cool. So dialogue and writing and all that is all very similar to Golden Age of the Sith. I've really enjoyed these, and I like the different ideas presented in them and everything. Why am I so quiet? Freaking, what is controlling my stupid microphone with Windows? The visuals I thought was really cool, and especially to note was the covers. How they all go side by side to show one sort of panoramic piece of art, which is really cool and I love it. You'll see that on the thumbnail, and I'll probably show it here as well. They're really good. The interior art as well, I've pretty much the same as Golden Age of the Sith, which I quite like the certain style it has. It's unique to it, and yeah, most of the time there's maybe one or two odd tiny bits of, like, maybe a little bit odd there, but most of the time it looks really good and it has a unique feel to it, which I really like. Plus, with the art, designs of ships and things is really cool. And continuity, I don't see, like, I really only have a continuity section if I see any errors. And at the moment, I like basically how Kevin J. Anderson will tie this into his later works as well. Especially when we get into the next Tales of the Jedi stuff, which will have Exar Kun, which connects in with the Jedi Academy trilogy. I really enjoyed the comic, basically. I'm really enjoying reading through these, and Dark Horse is really cool, and I think Kevin J. Anderson is sort of better suited to writing comics at the moment, because after a recent reread of Jedi Academy trilogy, I'm going, oh yeah, I really love them still, but maybe they're not as good as my memory made them. But yeah, that's for when I do an in-depth read through as well, which will be sometime. But yeah. So I've gone through my overall thoughts, so now I'll go into my notes as I read them, and so this will have spoilers. So issue 1, I like how Syndergaard didn't really take notice of Jory because they were so focused on catching her from the previous crimes. So Jory's gone back, and she exited hyperspace and back to Syndergaard, and they're just like, well, we gotta arrest her because she's a criminal. And they don't really listen to her about saying, oh, the Sith Empire's coming back and whatnot. And that's a little bit of a progressive complication that is really cool. And it's interesting that she seems to have trusted Arba a lot, but even then, he doesn't believe her, because of course, this stuff, because he feels like she took advantage of him. And I like that part as well, as like, he's a nice hut still, for whatever reason. I don't know why there's a nice hut, but I like that thing where they go, well, I can't trust you anymore because that happened. And Odener is back to studying, which is interesting to see. I liked how they kept that scholarliness from issue 0 of Golden Age of the Sith. he's saying how it's nice to have a moment to sort of meditate and read, because it seems like he mustn't have had a lot of time to do that with the Unification Wars and all that went on there. Which, thinking of the Unification Wars, I think of also Firefly, which in recent comics I've been collecting the trade paperbacks more. I've actually had sort of a Unification War as well as a sort of a second Unification War, but Firefly is separate from Star Wars, but I'm just noting the Unification Wars in Firefly is also what I think of when I hear that. And Master Uru appears with Empress Teta, which is cool. And he refers to the Sith Empire as the fabled Sith Empire. So they must have heard about the Sith Empire from somewhere. Earlier someone said about stories about monsters under the bed when she mentioned the Sith Empire. So they must have heard of the Sith Empire somewhere along the way. But more like myths and fables and things that may not completely be true. But they're there. And so I wonder how that went. That would have been really cool to have sort of something explaining how they became a sort of myth amongst them. It's interesting how Ludo Crash is still alive. And he comes back after his defeat and realizing what Sadao did. And Sadao gets Gav to activate the automated defenses that blow up his ship. And I'm like, ooh, you're really manipulating Gav to be a bad guy. You know, you're trying to get him to be like a Sith. Then, I thought it was weird. After that is when they invade the Republic. And I'm like, you're saying you're going to invade the Republic at the end of Golden Age of the Sith. And she went, but then you're like, oh. Let's wait a minute. And let's invade the Republic after killing Ludo Crash, who could have possibly been an ally. Who knows? Oh, and I forgot to note down the little subtitle for issue 1. But going on to issue 2 is Forces in Collision. It opens up with Jory on trial. It's interesting how much she did and how much they were pinning her for her crimes in the trial. Thought it was interesting how they did that. The judge is a monocled alien. I like noting the monocled aliens for some reason. They just have a really cool aesthetic about them in this. She is sentenced to work on Ronica, which is apparently a dangerous colony planet. Sadao is manipulating Gav again, along with talk about his plans of taking over the Republic. And it shows his forces gathering. And I thought one of the troops looks like he was inspired by Hellboy. It's just a funny art comparison. And presumably some time has passed, and then it shows Naga Sadao's meditation sphere. A ship that looks like it's an eye with wings. And this is also a type of ship that we see in Legacy of the Force that Lumiere gets and uses for a bit. So I thought it was really interesting to draw that parallel with the connection there. Back on Ronica, Jory makes a Wizard of Oz reference with saying, "There's no place like home." And it's interesting how she spontaneously makes an escape, and somehow she manages it, even though she's not been there for very long. It doesn't show her being able to observe for very long and whatnot, although she must have observed a bit. It goes, oh, she succeeded. I'm like, that seems quick. They sort of probably wanted to drive the plot forwards, I guess, rather than having her stuck there for too long. It's also odd, because they're ore shuttles that aren't manned by any crew. So I didn't know why there was a reason to keep atmosphere inside the ore shuttles. Like, I guess they want to, but there didn't seem a reason. Maybe it's to keep the ore warmer so it doesn't freeze over or something. I don't know, it seemed odd for that as well. And Jory is somehow brilliant as she goes to Sinagar in the shuttle. It crashes on entry into the atmosphere, and there's a repulsor chute that she uses to land the Empress Teta's palace. And it's like, how are you doing all this a bit again? I didn't know you could do all of that now. Like, they're known as being a bit foolish and not really taking the safe hyperspace routes that they plan and whatnot. I guess amongst all of that, that she must have learned stuff about infiltrating a palace somehow, and about how to use the ore shuttles and whatever. It is fun how she gets in, though. It's really cool to read, and Empress Teta thinks there's another assassination attempt on her life until Jory starts talking about the Sith Empire in earshot of the Jedi, and the Jedi rush over and like, what's that about the Sith Empire? Oh, they're actually coming? And then Sadao is taking his whole fleet to Sinagar, it reveals, leaving the Sith Empire basically undefended. And he's putting Gav in charge of his forces, which seems... It's interesting I was trying to manipulate him, but it also seems like, why would you trust it to this kid you basically just took as a student? Like, how much time has actually passed here? I don't know. Gav could easily just manipulate it so that he lets the Republic win against him. It's like, if you're gonna... Sada also says in his meditation sphere that he will focus on old and forbidden Sith ways, which I'm like, not sure why things will be forbidden to them. It's the dark side. They don't care if something's forbidden, they just go for it. And it sounds like battle meditation that he mentions, which is interesting, but it's of the sort that makes people see things like hallucinations and things to make them fear more, like there's a bigger fleet than there actually is, which I thought was interesting. And issue 3 is subtitled First Encounter. And it opens with Sk Ha-ho, taking a joyride in the Starbreaker 12, which he claimed from Jory when she got back and was imprisoned. And when he's taking the joyride, the whole Sith Empire just jumps into the system right in front of him, and he's like, well, I done messed up. And then the invasion begins, and it all looks awesome. Like, the whole art of it looks awesome. I love the art of the battles and everything. So, nice and colourful, and yeah, I just like it. Then Gav says, this deal is getting worse all the time, which I think is a fun throwback to Lando. And it's nice that the leader of the resistance to Empress Teta's takeover now has... She brings them in and says, I'll grant you amnesty and pardons if you fight for us and help us defend ourselves against the Sith Empire. Which is cool, and I like that. And Odin just for whatever reason, gives Jory a lightsaber, and I'm like, couldn't she just cut her limbs off with it if she doesn't use it right? Why are you just giving her a lightsaber? I don't know. It was like, well, we need one of our main characters to become a Jedi. Yeah, so give her a lightsaber. And it's cool how it has Gav going down to Sinagar and then being confronted by what he has done. Because being put in charge of the Sith fleet, he gave the orders to kill all the people and everything. And then he feels responsible for it and he goes, oh my goodness, what did I do? This is horrible. And then when he's meeting Arbor, and then the Masasi protecting him just slaughter Arbor the Hutt. And it's like, well, Gav doesn't really have the power. Either way, Sadao was going to get all the people massacred there. And then Jory comes across him and thinks that he killed Arbor. And then she activates the lightsaber like she's going to fight him. And it's like, well, we're going to see a confrontation of brother and sister, aren't we? But then issue 4 comes along, subtitled The Dogs of War. And then there's no lightsaber. She's not holding the lightsaber. I'm like, what? Where's the connection? But it cuts to her kneeling by Arbor's corpse and pleading with Gav to talk to her. And yeah, there's just the connection there. It's like, I guess she deactivated it when she realized it was Gav properly. And then she pleads him to talk to her. And then Gav takes off because he feels guilty, basically, and jumps in a starfighter, and Jory follows it to where Naga Sadao is, to his meditation ship, I'll call it. And Gav finally has the nerve to go against Sadao by going back there. After seeing everything, he's like, dude, I have to fight Naga Sato. Even if I'm gonna die, I have to fight against him somehow. Which is cool. I think Gav breaks Sato's concentration by firing on his meditation sphere, and the bulk of the Sith forces disappear as they were illusions. Created by Naga Sato by his battle meditation sort of variation where he causes people to hallucinate and all that. And it's like, well, that turns the tide of war. And it allows the Jedi and the Republic forces to win, basically, because they weren't trying to fight illusions. But it also reminds me, this hallucination bit reminds me of Cody Sunchild in the original Marvel comics. In one of the alternate dimensions, he could create beings from his mind in this alternate dimension. And it reminds me of that sort of power, which is actually really cool. The Republic will never fall, is what they say at the end of, like, when they win and that. And I'm like, that didn't end or age very well 5,000 years later. Years. Gav was silly enough to accept meeting Naga Sato face to face. So Naga Sato goes, well, you fight on me, you'll beat me. So come talk to me, see what we got. And he was a fool, because Naga Sato could just be like, force choke. Alright. And I thought Sato was going to kill him, but he seems to leave him on the damaged meditation sphere alone. The ship alone, and I'm like, oh, you just kill him, even though that's leaving him for dead. Although they do give it a reason why he's left later. Reinforcements from Ronica arrived just in the nick of time, because of course all of the people that were fighting against Empress Teta were on Ronica, doing basically penal punishment work, the hard stuff. Which is cool to connect into what we saw with Jory when we're there. And Master Uru lets his cyanogen gas out of his little crystal looking bubble thing, because he obviously needs that to breathe. And he lets it out to kill the Masashi, which is a nice move. Although he does die by releasing it, because of course he's exposed to the oxygen. So he sacrifices himself. But honestly, he was apparently supposed to be this Jedi Master, but I don't know how he could have actually taken action as far as doing anything else in that situation, because he can't really wield a lightsaber when he's this brain in a jar thing. There's big elephants around, which I thought was funny, because they just basically look like elephants. And Uru dies, so survives for a little bit, but he dies speaking to Odin prophesying that Odin will be one of the most ancient Jedi ever. It's just like, I'll see how that plays out. I'll take note of that. And Republic forces come to the meditation. Why did it autocorrect to fear? Anyway, meditation sphere. And then Naga Sato used the force to trigger solar flares to make the Sauron saber. And I'm like, cool. But also, Kevin J. Anderson seems to like this idea of this disturbing the star to be able to destroy the system. Because the Sun Crusher basically does the same thing, just not with the Force. I'm like, And he retreats back to the Sith Empire, of course, Naga Sato does that. And the battles were like on 3 different planets. They were on Kirak, Sinagar, and Coruscant. And they actually did attack Coruscant, which is cool. Separately with Odin, Jory, and Mehmet Nadil on the 3 separate planets. So it's really cool how we see each of the battles on each of the planets from their perspectives. And of course, the Sith Empire had no idea what was going on and failed in their attack. Which I guess is why it's called the Fall of the Sith Empire. Because they were in their age of decadence beforehand, and now they're sort of dwindling. And issue 5, the final issue, is called End of an Empire. And it's interesting how Sato returns to the Sith Empire and then is told he's no longer welcome there. Because, lo and behold, Ludo Crash is still alive. And he became the Dark Lord of the Sith while Naga Sato was gone and controls the Empire, exiling Sato as the greatest threat they face. But I go, is he? Awesome page of what's left of Sadow's fleet is lit up by Crash's forces, because it basically destroys his fleet, and Sadow manages to gain the upper hand and seemingly defeat Crash somehow this time. I was like, how many times are you gonna fight Ludo Crash and we think he's dead, but then he's gonna come back? But then Empress Teta's forces followed Sadow through the coordinates that Gav provided, so Gav survived long enough on the meditation sphere to provide them coordinates of the Sith Empire, and Empress Teta's forces just, boom, attack all of the Sith fleet that's there. And Empress Teta gives Sadow a chance to surrender for some reason. A little bit too merciful, but I guess they don't really know what the Sith are like at this time. And so they're acting the same as they would for any other enemy. There's literally a saber-toothed tiger looking character during the victory celebration on Coruscant, which I thought was funny. I'm like, you're just a saber-toothed tiger. And then they blow up Sadow's ship after he sacrificed all of the rest of the Massassi in the ships, as he appears to be performing some ritual. But I go, is he really dead? You don't know, because Ludo Crash we thought was dead like 2 times, but then he came back. Empress Teta's smile is, yeah, her smile is weird in one panel. It just looks weird when she smiles in that panel. It's like, what? And it's interesting how Odin chooses not to go back to the quiet planet he knew before, but to investigate and learn what he can from the remains of the Sith ships. So he's being proactive and going, the Sith could still be a threat. It's awesome how Odin finds a Sith holocron, and then thinks that he can build the Jedi library on Ossus. Great connection and origin for the Jedi library on Ossus, and that's really cool. And we see the Jedi library on Ossus turn up in Kevin J. Anderson's later works post Return of the Jedi, which is cool. Sadow did survive, they reveal, and they hide away on Yavin, which is connected to the Massassi temples that are built on Yavin that we see in the movies, which is awesome. But interestingly, he only has one ship with a few followers, and of course his followers are Massassi. So, the Sith Empire isn't completely dead. It's just a very much... It has fallen, so I guess the Fallen Sith Empire title is correct. But it's gonna come back. The final panel for Naga Sadow shows part of the temples being built, which is nice. And then it ends with Jory rebuilding Arba's repair bay and taking charge of it, when Empress Teta asks her what she wants as a reward for the information on that, because otherwise they would have been dead. That's a storyline, pretty cool. I thought that was a slow burn in parts, but it definitely paid off when it came to the ending and all the fights and battles and stuff. Although I think Golden Age of the Sith, because this is all pretty much one storyline weaved together, could have been titled a bit differently, because it didn't really feel like the Golden Age of the Sith. And there could be more on the Jedi at the time. Like, this says Tales of the Jedi, and yet we have the 2 protagonists of Gavin Joy Darragon and not actually Jedi. And so we could have had more focus on the Jedi. But we got what we got, and it was pretty cool. And it's interesting, letters to the editor, how Gavin J. Anderson explains the technology not advancing a lot in 5,000 years. He's like, well, our own technology over the time didn't advance much at all for thousands of years, and then more recently we just had a boom of technology. So that's how he likes to equate it, which is actually an interesting way of saying it. But I still think with some technology later on, as this was still back in 1997, there must have been a time in between where a lot of technology got set back, got destroyed and set back and lost the blueprints and all that, and they had to rediscover and redevelop technology rather than just reverse engineering it. So I think there was a lot of that too. But yeah, that was that for the fall of the Sith Empire. I hope you enjoyed reading this as well, and if you haven't read it, then read it yourself. Just do it! Read you! Yeah, I felt like doing that again because my 6-year anniversary and video for the E being decanonized, I just shaved my head as well, and I thought that was a really cool thing. Yeah, read you. Let me know what you thought of these comics, and I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on them. So thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Alright.